chosen one. There are moments when Allah does not defend you with words, but with exposure. What was once hidden, excused, or brushed aside is now being questioned out loud. People who stayed silent are uncomfortable. Those who justified the harm are nervous. A community is outraged, demanding answers, asking the question that should have been asked from the very beginning. Why was this ever okay to do to you? This is not sympathy, it is reckoning. Allah allowed you to endure what others couldn't so that truth would mature in silence and return with power. In Islam, injustice has an expiration date, and today you are witnessing what happens when Allah lifts the veil. These lessons are not about bitterness or revenge. They are about divine justice, spiritual elevation, and the unseen protection that surrounded you even when it felt like you were standing alone. Listen carefully, because what you're seeing now is Allah responding to what you survived. Chosen one, understand this deeply. Allah did not allow what happened to you because He was absent, unaware, or indifferent. He allowed it because exposure requires pressure, and truth cannot be separated from falsehood without a test that forces people to choose sides. In Islam, Allah does not only test individuals, He tests communities, leadership, friendships, families, and systems. And when injustice touches one person, it reveals the moral spine of everyone around them. When you were mistreated, silenced, overlooked, or harmed, Allah was watching who would stand for justice even when it was uncomfortable, costly, or unpopular, and who would protect wrongdoing because it benefited them, preserved their image, or kept their position safe. Some wrapped oppression in religious language, some called injustice patience, only when it wasn't happening to them, and others stayed silent, believing neutrality would protect them. But neutrality in the face of injustice is a choice, and Allah records it as such. The Quran makes it clear that Allah distinguishes between those who support truth and those who merely speak about it, and your suffering became the line that separated sincere faith from performative righteousness. Allah allowed the situation to unfold so the masks could fall naturally, without you accusing anyone, without you defending yourself, without you destroying your character, because when people reveal themselves through their own actions, their exposure is undeniable and permanent. Those who protected you quietly, made dua for you, spoke truth without seeking applause, or refused to participate in harm, were elevated in Allah's sight, even if no one noticed them at the time, while those who excused cruelty, justified abuse, or benefited from your pain unknowingly testified against themselves. This is why Allah sometimes allows the chosen one to be wronged in public view, not to humiliate the believer, but to document where every heart truly stood. What looked like abandonment was actually a divine audit. And now that the truth is surfacing and the community is questioning what was once normalized, you are witnessing the wisdom of Allah unfold, because He does not rush exposure. He perfects it, and when it arrives, it leaves no confusion about who stood with justice and who stood against it. Chosen one, what they never anticipated was that you would respond to injustice with restraint, dignity, and patience. Because in a world addicted to reaction, silence rooted in faith becomes the loudest testimony of all. In Islam, sabr is not passive surrender, it is disciplined strength, a conscious decision to place trust in Allah rather than in emotional retaliation. And when you chose patience, you unknowingly removed every excuse your oppressors were relying on. If you had shouted, they would have called you unstable. If you had fought back, they would have labeled you aggressive. If you had exposed everything prematurely, they would have accused you of bitterness, but your silence collapsed all of their narratives. Allah allowed you to endure quietly so that, over time, the contrast between your composure and their behavior would become impossible to ignore. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, endured insults, lies, and cruelty with patience, and history remembers his oppressors with shame, not because he argued, but because he remained anchored in truth. Your patience functioned the same way it documented innocence without words. Every day you remained steady. Every moment you refused to become what they claimed you were became recorded evidence that now stands against them as people begin asking why you never needed to defend yourself. In Islam, Allah promises that those who endure injustice with sabr will be granted victory, either in this world through clarity and honor, or in the next through reward beyond measure, and often through both. Now, as outrage rises and questions surface, your silence is being reinterpreted not as weakness, but as proof. Proof that you trusted Allah more than public opinion, proof that you were never hiding guilt, and proof that the truth never needed your voice to survive. Allah let time speak for you, and time, when guided by divine will, never lies. Chosen one, even when it felt like your name was being dragged, misunderstood, or spoken about in spaces you were never invited into, Allah was quietly guarding your honor in ways you could not see, because in Islam, honor is not ultimately granted by people, it is preserved by Allah Himself. Allah is as-Sitir, the one who conceals and protects, and while He allowed others the freedom to act, He did not give them permission to define you. He shielded your intentions, your sincerity, and your inner truth while allowing their actions, words, and choices to accumulate publicly over time, knowing that behavior leaves a trail no lies can permanently erase. You were not required to clear your name because Allah does not ask the innocent to exhaust themselves proving purity. Instead, He allows truth to mature until it stands on its own. What felt like silence from heaven was actually restraint Allah, withholding exposure until it would be complete, undeniable, and self-inflicted. In the Quran, Allah reminds us that He knows what the hearts conceal, and that knowledge became your protection, because while people speculated, Allah recorded reality. As time passed, contradictions began to surface, patterns repeated, and the same actions that were once hidden became visible, forcing people to confront what they had defended. This is divine justice in motion. Allah guarding the believer's honor while letting the oppressor's behavior speak louder than any accusation. Now, as the community questions what was done to you, your reputation is being restored without you lifting a finger, while their actions are being re-examined under the light of truth. This is how Allah defends the chosen one, not with arguments, but with alignment, not with noise, but with timing, proving that when Allah protects your honor, no amount of distortion can permanently damage what He Himself has safeguarded. Chosen one, this wave of outrage you are witnessing did not rise because people suddenly became brave or morally superior. It rose because Allah, the turner of hearts, decided the season of silence had ended and the season of truth had begun. For a long time, what was done to you was quietly justified, brushed aside, normalized, or hidden behind authority, tradition, fear, and selective religious language. And during that time, Allah commanded you to endure, not because the injustice was acceptable, but because exposure before its appointed time would not have produced clarity, it would have produced denial. In Islam, Allah does not unveil truth until it is undeniable, until excuses collapse under their own weight, and until even those who benefited from the wrong feel an inner disturbance they can no longer suppress. Community outrage is not noise. It is a spiritual signal that Allah has shifted the moral atmosphere. Hearts that once rationalized harm are now uncomfortable. Minds that once avoided the topic are now asking hard questions. The same actions that were once defended now feel heavy, wrong, and indefensible. And that discomfort is Allah reactivating fitra, the natural sense of justice He placed in every soul. The Quran reminds us that Allah changes the condition of a people when He changes what is within their hearts. And what you are seeing now is not chaos, rebellion, or drama. It is conscience returning. After a long period of suppression, Allah allowed time to pass so patterns could repeat, so behavior could reveal intent, and so what happened to you would no longer look like an isolated incident, misunderstanding, or exaggeration, but part of a visible reality that people could no longer unsee. This outrage is also Allah separating truth from emotional attachment. Those who once defended wrong because of loyalty, power, or fear are now being forced to confront the difference between faith and favoritism, between justice and comfort. For you, chosen one, this moment is divine validation. It is Allah saying, I saw what you endured, I recorded what you restrained, and I protected your dignity while I prepared the hearts of others to finally see clearly. You were never meant to convince the community Allah was. You were never required to shout your pain. Allah preserved it until hearts were ready to hear it without distortion. While you were patient, Allah was teaching the community through consequences, reflection, and internal unrest that injustice does not expire, silence does not erase accountability, and time does not sanctify wrongdoing. Now conversations are shifting, questions are surfacing, and neutrality is becoming uncomfortable, because Allah has decided that what was hidden has fulfilled its purpose, and what was tolerated has crossed its limit. This outrage is not meant to elevate you through sympathy, nor to destroy others through humiliation. It is meant to restore balance, to correct narratives, and to remind everyone that patience from the oppressed never equals approval from Allah. The narrative has changed not because people suddenly love justice, but because Allah has reclaimed it. And when Allah rewrites the story, the oppressed are vindicated without chasing validation, the truth stands without being defended, and those who once felt untouchable realize that no position, no reputation, and no silence can protect injustice once Allah brings it into the light. Chosen one, you must anchor this truth firmly in your heart, so it never becomes distorted by pain or confusion. Allah did not fail you, people did. Systems did. Structures built on ego, fear, and self-preservation did. But Allah remained exactly who He has always been. Al-Adl, the perfectly just, and Al-Hakim, the most wise. What happened to you was not divine neglect. It was human corruption, operating under titles, traditions, authority, and sometimes even religious language, and Islam never confuses the behavior of people with the character of Allah. Allah allowed you to pass through flawed systems because He wanted you to learn at a soul level that reliance on anything other than Him will eventually disappoint you, no matter how righteous, powerful, or respectable it appears. The Quran repeatedly reminds us that humans are weak, forgetful, and unjust when left to their egos. And what you experienced was the painful reality of that truth, not a reflection of your worth, your iman, or Allah's love for you. Those systems were designed to protect reputations, maintain hierarchy, avoid accountability, and preserve comfort, not to uphold justice when it became inconvenient and when you needed protection, fairness, or basic compassion. They chose order over morality and silence over truth. Allah, however, never abandoned you in those moments. He was watching how you responded, how you restrained yourself, how you refused to become bitter, cruel, or corrupt in return, because your test was never about whether systems would treat you fairly. It was about whether your heart would remain aligned with Him when they didn't. In Islam, Allah often allows His chosen servants to be harmed by people who claim righteousness, so that the believer never confuses Allah's authority with human authority, never equates divine justice with institutional approval, and never anchors their faith to anything that can collapse. What felt like betrayal was actually separation, Allah separating you from false security, false protection, and false saviors. He let the systems fail you so you would never mistake them for Him. And now, as outrage grows and questions are being asked, it becomes clear that what you endured was not an Islamic failure, but a human one, not a flaw in divine justice, but in human accountability. Allah preserved your iman while exposing the limits of man-made power, and that preservation is itself a mercy. Your pain refined your tawakkul, stripped illusions from your faith, and anchored your trust directly to Allah, not intermediaries. This is why, even though you were wounded, you were not destroyed, because Allah never left you unattended. He allowed injustice to reach you, but He did not allow it to own you. He allowed people to reveal their weakness, but He protected your soul from becoming like them. And when the time was right, He began revealing that the failure was never divine. It was structural, moral, and human. This lesson is heavy, but it is liberating. Allah does not need flawed systems to defend His servants, and He does not tie your worth to how institutions treat you. You were seen when you were ignored, defended when you were blamed, and honored when you were dismissed. The systems may have failed you publicly, but Allah succeeded privately in preserving your faith, strengthening your discernment, and preparing you for a level of reliance, clarity, and spiritual authority that could only be born from realizing with certainty that Allah alone never fails those who trust Him. Chosen one, there are moments when Allah allows pain to travel through a single soul, not to break it, but to awaken many others who had grown spiritually numb. And this is one of those moments where your suffering became the mirror the community could no longer avoid looking into. For a long time, what happened to you was dismissed as insignificant, exaggerated, or inconvenient, because acknowledging it would have required people to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves, their silence, their complicity, and the systems they benefited from. In Islam, Allah warns against hearts becoming hardened, because when comfort is prioritized over justice, communities slowly lose their moral sensitivity and wrongdoing begins to feel normal. Your pain disrupted that numbness. It lingered. It did not disappear quietly. It resurfaced in questions, in patterns, in repeated behavior that others began to recognize. And Allah used that persistence to shake consciences that had long been asleep. The Quran teaches that Allah sends reminders in many forms, and sometimes the reminder is not a sermon, not a verse, not a scholar's warning, but a lived experience of injustice that becomes too visible, too heavy, and too consistent to ignore. You did not set out to expose anyone, Yet Allah turned your endurance into a signal, because your wounds carried truth without exaggeration. People began to see that what happened to you was not an isolated incident, not a misunderstanding, not bad luck, but a symptom of a deeper moral failure. This is when pain transforms into responsibility. Your suffering forced conversations that comfort had silenced. It challenged narratives that were built on denial. It compelled people to choose between defending what was familiar and standing for what was right. Allah allowed your pain to echo because He wanted the community to confront the consequences of ignoring injustice when it first appears. In Islam, collective responsibility is real. When wrongdoing is tolerated, it spreads, and Allah warns that punishment and accountability do not only fall on the individual oppressor, but on those who enabled it through silence. Your pain became the alarm Allah used to prevent further harm, because sometimes mercy comes disguised as discomfort. While you were tested with endurance, the community was tested with awareness, and many failed at first, but Allah did not abandon them to that failure. He gave them time to reflect, to notice patterns, to feel the unease growing in their chests, until silence itself became unbearable. This is why outrage eventually rises, not as emotion, but as realization. People begin to understand that ignoring pain does not make it disappear. It multiplies it. They see that your dignity remained intact despite mistreatment, and that contrast unsettles the conscience. Allah allowed your pain to remain unresolved long enough for hearts to recognize it as a moral debt. For you, chosen one, this means your suffering was never meaningless. Allah was writing a lesson larger than your individual story. He was teaching the community what happens when justice is delayed, when power goes unchecked, and when religious language is used to excuse harm. Your pain became the proof that something was wrong, and proof demands response. While you remained patient, Allah was gradually removing the community's ability to look away. This does not mean everyone will repent or change, but it does mean no one can claim ignorance anymore. In Islam, once truth becomes clear, neutrality ends. Your endurance forced clarity, your restraint forced accountability, your pain forced awareness, and even though it cost you deeply, Allah honored that cost by turning it into a wake-up call that may protect others from the same harm. This is not romanticizing suffering, it is recognizing divine wisdom within it. Allah does not love injustice, but He knows how to transform it into guidance. He allowed your pain to become visible enough to disturb comfort, loud enough to pierce denial, and lasting enough to demand reflection. And now, as the community can no longer ignore what happened, your suffering stands not as a scar of shame, but as a sign of awakening proof that Allah can take what wounded you and use it to restore moral sight to those who had lost it, while elevating you in His sight for carrying a burden that ultimately served a purpose far greater than you ever chose. Chosen one, the most crucial and liberating truth to understand as you reflect on everything you endured is that you will never be the one required to justify, defend, or explain yourself to those who wronged you, because in Islam, ultimate accountability belongs to Allah alone, and He is the one who asks first, judges last, and measures every action with perfect justice and knowledge beyond human perception. What people did to you, the betrayal, the dismissal, the abuse, the exploitation, the lies, and the systemic neglect was never in your hands to correct, and it was never your duty to convince anyone of your innocence or integrity. Their misdeeds, their decisions, their complicity, and their justifications are all recorded in the presence of Allah, and on the Day of Judgment, they will be asked to answer him first, before anyone else can question or accuse you. The Quran emphasizes that no soul will bear the burden of another, and this applies as much to justice as it does to wrongdoing, meaning the oppressors and enablers of harm will stand before Allah, and every action, every word, every silence they relied upon to harm you will be examined in its entirety. Your patience, your silence, your restraint, and your refusal to retaliate have placed you in a position of divine protection, because while humans measure accountability based on emotion, perception, or societal norms, Allah measures with absolute justice, weighing every intention, every hardship endured, and every act of integrity. They may attempt to twist narratives, accuse, manipulate public opinion, or rewrite history, but these efforts are powerless against Allah's infinite knowledge. Even if the community debates, speculates, or demands explanations, the truth of your heart, your intentions, and your endurance cannot be overshadowed. This is the essence of divine vindication. You were never required to prove your value to those who chose harm, because Allah, who knows the unseen and visible, already saw, recorded, and will reward accordingly. In Islam, those who wrong others and ignore the rights of the oppressed will face a trial unique to their actions. Their conscience, their intentions, and the consequences of every decision that harmed you will be laid bare, and the scales of justice will weigh far beyond what human eyes can witness. This understanding allows you, chosen one, to carry your head high, to remain unshaken, and to continue your journey with tawakkul, because your role was not to defend, manipulate, or retaliate. It was to endure, remain faithful, and trust in Allah's perfect plan. While they scramble to justify themselves to the world, Allah has already begun the process of holding them accountable in ways that will leave no room for excuses, and this is why the Quran repeatedly reminds us that ultimate justice is with Allah, that every soul will taste the results of its deeds, and that patience in the face of oppression is a pathway to spiritual elevation, honor, and divine protection. You may witness outrage, questions, or public reckoning now, but the final reckoning is with Allah, and He will ensure that those who harmed, neglected, or betrayed you cannot escape their responsibility, even if the world continues to misunderstand. Your patience, integrity, and reliance on Him have already positioned you above human judgment, because you are not accountable for the hearts and actions of the unjust. Every insult, every slight, every attempt to diminish you is recorded, but your endurance is also recorded, and Allah promises that those who trust Him will be elevated, vindicated, and restored in ways that no worldly force can diminish. Therefore, chosen one, do not carry the weight of their failure or allow their ignorance to burden your heart. It is not your duty to explain, to fight, or to justify yourself. Your duty was to trust, to remain steadfast, and to protect your heart and your honor. And now, as the community reacts, as outrage rises, and as questions are asked, remember that their answers will be demanded by Allah long before yours are, that every word they utter, every justification they cling to, and every attempt to obscure the truth will be weighed and measured, and that ultimate justice does not require your intervention, only your patience, your faith, and your trust in the one who never errs, never overlooks, and never fails those who place their reliance entirely in Him. You endured, you preserved your integrity, and you trusted the unseen, And this trust guarantees that when the scales of justice are balanced, those who wronged you will face the reckoning they cannot escape, and you, chosen one, will stand vindicated not because people witnessed it in the moment, but because Allah, who sees all, has decreed your honor and your reward, and their accountability will begin and end before anyone else ever questions your worth, your integrity, or your faith. Chosen one, now you see the truth. What was done to you was never a reflection of your weakness, your worth, or your place in Allah's plan. It was a mirror revealing the hearts, intentions, and limitations of those around you. Every act of betrayal, every moment of silence, every injustice you endured has served a divine purpose: to separate truth from falsehood, to purify your heart, to elevate your patience, and to awaken a community that could no longer ignore what is real. Today, Outrage rises not to punish you, but to testify that Allah's justice never sleeps, that the oppressed are never unseen, and that every soul will answer for its deeds before the one who sees all. Remember, chosen one, the world may misunderstand, judge, or attempt to rewrite your story, but Allah is the ultimate author, and He protects, vindicates, and rewards those who endure with faith. Stand firm in your dignity, walk boldly in your purpose, and carry your patience as a crown, because what was meant to harm you has instead revealed your strength, elevated your spirit, and prepared you for the victories Allah has reserved just for you. Let this be a reminder. You are never alone, your value cannot be measured by others, and no injustice escapes the sight of Allah. Keep trusting, keep enduring, and keep shining, because the one who orchestrates the heavens has already written your triumph, and the world will witness it in time.